G'day, well welcome to our third video in this Next Steps series, and the purpose of these videos is just to plant some ideas and get some discussion going amongst us here at Citywide Baptist Church as to what kind of future we believe God is calling us to. And each week I'll just be giving you something to think about. Love your comments below in the comments section. If you could make some comments, I'd really appreciate that. And even come and chat to me at church on a Sunday or whatever. For those of you who aren't part of Citywide Baptist Church, hope these are helpful for you too. But these really are a dialogue for us here at Citywide Baptist Church about our future and what it is that God is calling us to. Today I want to introduce you to an idea I first heard about in Canada from one of the leading figures in community development in North America. His name is John McKnight, and he wrote a paper that I'm going to see if we can find a way to make available for you to have a look at. He wrote the paper back in 1996 called A 21st Century Map for Healthy Communities and Families, and in it he talked about the difference between hierarchies and associations. There's one way of looking at it. He said, look, most organisations and most organisational maps look a bit like this. And he said, you have someone at the top, and then they have some people who report to them, and then they have people who report to them. And this is the normal organisational map. Often the maps are a little neater than that, but you get the picture. That is, most organisational maps are like that, a hierarchy of influence. And he said there's some challenges with that organisational model. There are three particular strengths, he said, that organisational model has. One is it allows somebody with an idea to make that idea happen in lots of different ways, in lots of different places. So if somebody has a design for a car, what this organisational model means is thousands of people in different ways can be involved in producing this one person's idea if this person has the most influence in the organisation. Now, that's really important. If you want to make something happen and make something happen regularly in a way that involves more than just you. He said another strength of this is that it is very good at producing a great deal of the same thing. So this organisational model produces the same products in a reliable way over and over again. You can see this most clearly worked out when you go and buy a Big Mac. It is quite remarkable the way McDonald's have been able to, with 15-year-olds all around the world, make a consistent product because they have very tightly delineated structures about who can influence what and how that happens, and how long a hamburger has to be on a grill before it gets cooked, and how many pickles go into a Big Mac. And so you will get, and I've had Big Macs all over the world, which is probably not a good sign, but wherever I've gone, Big Macs are Big Macs because they are able to produce a great deal of the same thing. The third thing that John McKnight says these structures are very good at doing is helping produce customers who want a good deal of the same thing. So this system produces people who tend to want a great deal of the same thing. He's saying this is not bad. For instance, if you're going to fly a plane, or fly on a plane, you really do want a very tight hierarchical structure where the pilot is clearly in control. If you didn't have a tight hierarchical structure on an airplane and you didn't have clear maintenance checks and all that kind of thing, flying would be deadly. So this is not necessarily a bad thing. What McKnight says though, and this is what it's helpful for us to hear, is that organisational models like this have some limitations, and they're sort of built up into kind of what he's already saying. He says this kind of model produces a great deal of the same thing, but isn't so good at producing individual responses to individual people. So if you want to do a great deal of the same thing, then this is the way to do it. But if you're wanting to deal with individuals, then this isn't the way to go. He talks about associations, and what he means by that is just relationships. And so he talks about networks of association and how a man by the name of Alexis de Tocqueville did some research in America more than 100 years ago, and said the great secret of the strength of American society wasn't its organisations, but it's what he called its associations. These groups of people who come together by mutual agreement towards a mutual end. And he talked about churches and how important, like in a church, people who come to a church choose to come, and it's not a hierarchical organisation when it's at its best. Now, what's been interesting is after Alexander de Tocqueville did that research, is that the way we've thought about church has shifted a bit, and a lot of church structures actually do reflect more this CEO top-down kind of model, and a little less the association or the organisation. One of the big things that I think is fairly evident, but McKnight makes it really clear, is that an organisation like this cannot care. He said people care, organisations don't care. And if you want to care, if you want care, that's where one-on-one kind of relationship that only can happen in the form of an association. And I've been thinking about this, and I encourage you, if you get a chance, I mean, you don't have to read the paper, but I'm hoping to make it available to you, and feel free to skim it as he talks about the differences. But as I reflect on the New Testament church, I think what you see is much less of this and much more of this. It's so much so that although even it's clear that the New Testament church saw that Peter had a particular leadership role, this new upstart, the Apostle Paul, who wasn't even part of the original 12, had the temerity to come and tell Peter off. The relationship of the New Testament church was one in which they related to each other. It wasn't top-down. And whenever you see one of the apostles get up to preach or teach, it's a different message they're giving because it's a different audience. They're not doing a great deal of the same thing. So I think one of the questions for us as a church is, I don't think it's right to just completely do away with the organisational model. But it's important for us to think about, how does an organisational model relate to what John McKnight talks about as an association? And what does it mean for us to be a people who care, and not just a people who produce a great deal of the same thing, and whether there can be this tendency, particularly in the modern world, to start to think of a Sunday morning service being this product, and it's pretty clear that the church is not meant to be a product, and it's certainly not meant to be something that is just churning out a great deal of the same thing. So what does it mean for us? I want to encourage you to think about the New Testament church and what it was. If you get a chance to read John McKnight's paper, have a think about that, scan through that, and have a think about, for us as a church, or for any church, do we tend to be more a top-down kind of thing? Do we tend to be more an association? How does that work? And what do we want to be? What is God calling us to be? Like I said, I don't know that God's telling us to get rid of the whole organisational structures. I don't think that's right. But I do think we need to stop and think about, what is our organisational structure and how does that work? So encourage you. I'd love to get your feedback. Love to hear what you think. And if you get a chance, read this paper, and we'll continue this dialogue about where God is calling us into the future.